Welcome everyone to the webcast Driving Employee Engagement Through Continuous Learning, sponsored by Fuse Universal. This webcast has been pre-approved for HRCI, SHRM, and World at Work credit. Please be sure to attend the complete webcast in order to receive your credits. You will receive an email from hr.com within 2 business days, which will include your certification credit information. You may also log into hr.com and go to your View My Credits page where you can see the credits that you've received. If you have any questions during today's webcast, please click on the Q&A in your webinar controls and enter them there. Once the presentation has begun this morning, I am going to put a couple of links in the chat area. There will be a link to the slides as well as a link to the exit survey. A new tab will open up in your browser with the exit survey. Please be sure to complete it as soon as the webcast has ended. All right, that's all of the logistics. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to today's presenters.
Thanks so much, Rhonda. This is Ray Cairnes. Just to revisit the housekeeping a little bit, we do encourage questions throughout the webinar. We want to make this as interactive as possible, and please jump in at any time. And again, it will be recorded and available to watch later on. So by way of introduction, my name is Ray Cairnes. Just a little background to kind of set the scene here. I began my career in learning and development. I was actually a French teacher. Then I moved on into corporate education. I launched a few learning management systems. I worked as a learning and development consultant for Accenture. Consulting in different industries, large and small companies around the world, from US to Europe, as far as the South Gobi Desert of Mongolia at some point in my life. So I've been observing and adopting best practices in preparation for becoming the head of learning and development at a few different companies, which I did at a tech startup, a big tech company, and a global media company. And now I'm bringing my experience to Fuse Universal. And I'll turn it over to my partner, Josh.
Hi, everybody. It's Josh Devanny here from Fuse as well. I head up sales in North America. I've recently moved to the US from London, where I've been with Fuse for around 5 years. Previous to that, I worked at other learning technology companies, helping large and small enterprises implement learning technology solutions. So very excited to speak with you today.
That's great. Thanks, Josh. So I'd like to start by telling you all a story about learning and pizza. In 2007, I fulfilled my personal dream of living in New York City, which also happened to coincide with the summer the iPhone was released, and that detail will come back around later. As a child, I grew up loving pizza, eating pizza at buffets in our local small town pizzerias, even frozen pizzas. I was not very discerning or discriminating when it came to pizza. So you can imagine how happy I was to have a really great pizza on almost every street corner in New York at practically any hour of the day. So that's on the personal side. But on a professional note, learning and development was evolving along with the technology that was being released at the time. And I remember that e-learning was super popular, which led to the production of what I now call e-learning movies. So these 1 hour or more feature-length videos that at the time were exciting to create, but ultimately they're exciting to create as a learning and development professional and very different from the classroom training that we had relied on in the past. But as you know, tech moves fast. And as I began to notice that both at work and at home, attention spans were getting shorter and engaging learners was getting more and more difficult. So I'd say in the last 5 to 7 years, I knew something was wrong with the learning solutions we as a learning and development community were putting out, but I wasn't sure exactly how to address it. I recently had an aha moment when I made the connection that if I can find the best pizza within a 2-block radius in 30 seconds or less on my smartphone, then why couldn't we as an L&D industry emulate that experience with the learning solutions we were providing instead of continuing to put out e-learning movies, which were losing their luster with both learners and, quite frankly, learning and development teams. So we were all gradually becoming more and more disengaged due to the lack of alignment between learning and how we consumed info in our day-to-day lives. So I began to look at our approach to learning with a more critical eye, and I identified a few problems. I realized that, number one, we were measuring the wrong thing. The training metrics or KPIs that we were reporting were not giving our stakeholders insight on the impact to the business we were actually making with training. For example, if I made the statement that our learners collectively spent 1,000 hours in training in the previous quarter, my finance department's next question was, and what did we get for that investment? And honestly, I couldn't always quantifiably answer that question. So we had to stop our organization from thinking about traditional training metrics and being impressed by the number of training courses we've completed or the number of hours we put learners through. And we had to start tightly engaging with the business to understand their learning needs, to deliver learning solutions at the speed of business, to increase learner performance. We also had to tie our learning to business goals and objectives to help us measure our business impact. And we also needed to quantify and measure learning engagement beyond the annual employee engagement survey. So that was our first problem. Secondly, we also were not packaging our content or providing a platform so that learners could efficiently find the relevant information they need in a quick and organized way, like finding the best pizza. See, it all comes back to pizza. So they could answer any questions they had or sate their curiosity with short, consumable chunks of content or performance support. So they could get right back into their work and continue delivering business impact by adding value, increasing revenue, or gaining efficiency. So with that problem, we had to start differentiating between learning and training. See, learning is involved in things we do every day, all day, on the fly, finding that pizza when we want it, right? So whereas training is a structured event or a series of events. We also needed to ensure the learning environment looked, felt, and behaved like the apps people were used to using in their day-to-day lives. Third problem, our solutions were one size fits all with little or no consideration for pre-existing knowledge, employee role, experience level, or tenure. We needed to assess what our learners already knew so we could focus their attention and be respectful of their valuable time by helping them to hone in on learning content to fill their skill gaps versus having them watch one of our movies that we were so proud of. The fourth problem, and a lot of you may be familiar with the forgetting curve, which ultimately says if you don't apply what you've learned, you lose it, especially over time. I knew that very few learners would come back to our movie and scrub through the video and try to find that 2 to 3 minute chunk of information that demonstrated the skill or concept that they needed to know in order to perform in their jobs. So they would turn to other sources such as asking a colleague, Googling for an answer, and potentially less reliable sources. So we began learning about leveraging brain science and implementing micro-learning and schemas and repetition. And if that wasn't enough, the war for talent started to really hit home with a very clear decrease in employee tenure, noticing the impact of AI and automation on the skills that we were training learners on, and the growing disengagement in the workplace in general. So I think this is probably a good time to take a pause and see where you are with engagement. So I think we've got a poll question that Rhonda's going to put up for us. So with all of these things in mind, how engaged would you say are the employees in your organization? Very disengaged, up through very engaged. We'll give you a few seconds to log your answer there. And it looks like we're in the middle of the road here in terms of majority, so neither particularly engaged or disengaged. After that, engaged, 35%, that looks great, and then disengaged around 15%, and then the other two fall on the extreme. So, all right, great, thanks for the insight. It seems like we're in a decent place, but a place for improvement, right? So with all of this going on, my bigger realization was we were not only addressing these challenges, but we were attempting to drive a big culture change, shifting how we learned as an organization. So no small task, right? So it seems pretty dire. I needed to not only change my teams and my organization's thinking and approach about learning and development, but I knew that our vehicle to get there, our learning technology, was not going to help us revolutionize our learning and development either. So I began my search for a new learning management system. But the thing is, I didn't know what I didn't know. So by that, I mean, I began to develop a list of 200 requirements, and I vetted 12 different learning platforms. And all of these things I was realizing were very much guiding me towards selecting another learning management system, which, although it was shiny and new, was probably not going to enable me to address the challenges I had identified. And one of those platforms was Fuse, which is where Josh comes into the story.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Ray. So I think right now today, learning and development teams have a lot of big choices to make when it comes to technology. Many of you on the call today will have maybe implemented a learning management system in your organization. And learning management systems have been around for 20 plus years with a real goal of delivering compliance and formal-based training to your employees. I think we can all agree that learning management systems haven't revolutionized the learning industries. Employees don't go to LMSs every single day to complete learning. Traditionally, LMSs can be hard to find content. You know, it's very hard to search like we do in our personal lives. And the content inside learning management systems is obviously very heavy and clunky, which again, doesn't really inspire learners to want to return there. So although LMSs have been a great platform to track and deliver compliance training and events to the organization, they haven't really transformed the industry. In recent years, we've also seen learning experience platforms, or LXPs, emerge. And this was a term first coined by Josh Devanny a couple of years ago, when he shared the explosion in the sector with a bunch of new platforms, which were much more consumer grade in how they appeared to an end user. Learning experience platforms have some great features. You know, they look great from a consumer perspective. You know, they can be branded and personalized to your corporate look and feel. They often include lots of AI and machine learning to help recommend better content with more relevancy to your end users. And they also integrate into content libraries that exist in the world. You know, platforms like LinkedIn Learning or Harvard Managed Mentor. And these platforms often sit in front of or around a learning management system. But you know, for many organizations, they don't want to have to buy multiple systems and connect these all together for the organization. And at times, you often want one single system where you can streamline all your learning through there, both formal and informal. So although Fuse is both a learning management system and a learning experience platform in terms of how we're used, we are quite unique. So Fuse, by very large organizations, is used as a learning management system to deliver compliance and events out to your organization. But the look and feel of Fuse, the machine learning we're embedding in there, and the analytics actually make it more of a learning experience platform as well. So right now, our customers are getting, you know, two platforms for one, if you like, using Fuse. So I think a nice pause on that is just to really reflect and see, you know, who's using an LMS today, who's maybe got an LXP, or maybe who's got both an LMS and LXP. So if we just launch a quick poll before going to the next question. So are you currently using an LMS or LXP? Few options here, yes to an LMS, LXP, both, neither, or you don't know what any of them are. Okay, so just looking at the results. So most of, or half probably of today's population have a learning management system. No one's currently using LXP. And some of you don't know what any of them are. Hopefully we can share some information after today's webinar to educate you on what LXPs and LMSs actually are as well. So thank you for taking the time to do that. If we go into what a platform like Fuse includes, there's lots of technology inside there which you can use to transform how your employees learn in the flow of work. So if you look at this image on the screen, at the heart of everything inside Fuse is analytics. We want to start to measure and track everything that happens in a learning platform, because this gives you, as a learning team, more insights into how your people are learning, on what device, what their content preferences are, and even what time they're engaging with content. So you can actually improve your content strategy over a period of time. On the left-hand side of the image, you'll see a platform like Fuse can capture different types of content in the platform. So to start with, you've got organizational knowledge. For us right now, this is the most important type of content that you can share into a learning platform. Of course, you can integrate a content library or purchase some external content and upload it. But for us, we genuinely believe that the tacit knowledge that exists inside your people's heads needs to be shared across the organization. So what we want you to do is consider how you can find the best salesperson's knowledge, or the best person's knowledge in marketing or manufacturing or IT. Bottle that greatness, usually through videos and other ways, and then share that across communities. So it's a very nice way to accelerate knowledge transfer across the enterprise. You can also curate content automatically from different feeds that exist around the world. So that would automatically scrape websites and surface that to different audiences. For example, every single day giving your leaders or your managers great content from Harvard Business Review, that type of thing. And then also integrating into libraries, as mentioned, like LinkedIn, GetAbstract, Coursera. In the heart of this image, you'll see some other tools that are available. So the learning management system functionality, i.e. events, delivering compliance and tracking and reporting of that, is still very, very crucial to organizations. You've got a design studio, which basically gives your learning professionals and your team a set of tools and widgets to deploy great learning experiences out to the business. So that might be building a sales enablement program, or building an amazing leadership development program with different tools and widgets depending on the experience that you're trying to achieve with the audience. And then you'll also have other tools like audience management, which basically allows you to deploy a platform like Fuse or another LXP to a large population and with a set of filters. So basically saying, if somebody is in sales in New York and they've been with the company for 2 years, then we need to give them this type of content as well. And then on the right-hand side, just to finish off of this image, platforms like Fuse now can also have the ability to connect to other platforms that exist inside your organization. Again, to coin the term learning in the flow of work from Josh Bersin, now what we want to do is really put platforms like Fuse where your users' attention are and where their engagement is. So now many platforms integrate with platforms like Salesforce, Microsoft Teams, Workplace by Facebook, SharePoint, etc., etc. To really enable users to get to content very quickly, rather than spending 10-15 minutes trying to find a piece of content in a traditional LMS. And then also integrating with other platforms as well. There are an amazing set of learning technology platforms out there today. Platforms like Anders Pink, which curates content, Filtered, which maps skills and competencies to content, and Training Orchestra for resource management. It really now allows platforms like Fuse now to connect to the best of breed technology out there to give your users the best experience. And then also using non-learning technology. Fuse, for example, is hosted on Amazon Web Services, which means it's completely scalable across countries around the world and guarantees performance for your users as well. So that's just a quick overview as the Fuse learning ecosystem and how that technology can be used in different ways to give your employees a great learning experience.
Hey, Josh, can I jump in with a question here? And just sort of reflecting back on our experience, right? So, I came to Josh and he, gave me the pitch and showed me the demo and all of that. And, the concept of this learning ecosystem, we really hadn't even thought of before, because it was, again, going back to, we didn't know what we didn't know. So I'm wondering, do you find that a lot when people approach Fuse, or we approach different people that may be interested in our platform? And how do you talk about all of these, basically new ways of approaching learning and helping to bring people along that journey? Because you have to kind of wrap your mind around it before you can, start to really buy into it. I, for example, didn't know that all of this existed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most organizations we speak to today, again, don't know this exists or is available to them to actually use in their organization. And I think learning management systems have been around for 15, 20 years, that a lot of L&D professionals and learning teams are quite disengaged with the concept of a learning management system. But at the same time, it can also be quite scary to move all your hard years of work and content development and programs that you've designed in the LMS to a new platform like Fuse or a different type of learning system as well. So for my recommendation is always, don't try and boil the ocean on day one. Start small and scale it to the business. Find an area of the business where you can really prove and demonstrate value of this type of solution, and really focus on performance. A lot of our customers at Fuse are really now designing programs inside the platform and focus on performance. So actually, what is the performance output of that learning program that we're trying to achieve? So I think it's really understanding how these platforms can help drive business value and business performance, and they're not just pushing out content to the users. They're doing much more than that. So it's a long journey that you need to go through, and many of our customers have done that. But once you make the jump and transform the way people learn, it has huge impacts on the business performance that we're seeing.
That's great. Thanks, Josh. I'm wondering if there are any questions in the Q&A at this point. This is a lot to absorb so far.
Not just yet.
All right, we'll go on then.
Perfect. And then, so I think it's talking about what the future of learning looks like. And, there are lots of, talk around AR and VR and that type of thing. But in reality, VR and AR is something which could really transform how we learn, but it's not something that's, really been done even in the consumer life in a mass scale just yet. So I think we're a little bit away from that actually happening in a learning way. I guess the first thing that we see from what the future looks like with learning is that every learning program will have a measurable business outcome to it. Now, a lot of you on the call might be doing this today, so you might not think that's too revolutionary. But I speak to a lot of learning professionals and organizations who are creating these great courses, whether it be online or face-to-face, but they don't always necessarily have a measurable business outcome to it. So what we're talking about here is, in the future, every single time you deploy a piece of content or you create an event or online training for an audience, it will have a measurable business outcome to it. So, you'll be thinking about the KPIs or the objectives of that course and how that correlates to the business performance, whether it's be customer service ratings, reducing attrition, increasing sales revenue, that type of thing. Every single course or program will have a measurable outcome to it. I think moving beyond that, you'll have lots of new ways in which the L&D team are actually structured. At Fuse, we see our customers completely transforming the way their team is built. So, you might have new skill sets inside there, which might be moving from instructional designers to video storytellers, where you actually have a full-time videographer in your team recording all the best knowledge that exists inside your organization and sharing it. I think the role of a data analyst will be in every single L&D team in the future, where they are analyzing the data and how people are learning. And then based upon that data and the trends, they will then create better content in line with what the demand says. We also have more performance consultants who will be going into the business, spending much more time with business leaders to understand the programs that need to be designed as well. And then beyond that, from a technology perspective, we will see the rise of chatbots, undoubtedly, where users will be able to ask questions to a chatbot in a very simple way, and then receive, a video, an article, an infographic, a link based upon that search that was made inside the chatbot. And that really links to kind of much more performance support than anything, where learning systems will become performance support tools. Really how we use Google today. Google and YouTube are probably the biggest learning platforms on the planet. If any of us want to learn something today, we'll probably go to Google or YouTube. So I think we'll see learning platforms evolve to be more performance support led, to enable people to find content in seconds rather than minutes. Not sure if there's any questions on that part, but if not, I will head over to Ray. Actually, we've just got two questions. So Miki, you've asked, do you find LMS's LXP are housed in IT or HR departments, while HR might curate content training program system itself, maintenance may not be HR's strong point? It's a very good question. We see that LMSs and LXPs are ultimately owned by HR. They might have support from IT from a integration perspective with other technologies that exist inside the ecosystem. But ultimately, for these platforms to succeed, they need to be owned by talent, learning, and HR teams to ensure they're really built for the business objectives that you're trying to achieve with learning. So I think you need to work in partnership. I know all my clients do. I know Ray did when he was at Omnicom, work in partnership with IT to make sure you're in sync. But they definitely need to be owned by the HR or talent department, not IT, in my opinion. And I've got one more question, if we've got time, Ray, from Catherine as well. So based on the stats on the previous survey, if people don't use LMS systems because they're not user-friendly, or they don't know what they are, how are you going to get them to use an LXP? That's a very good question to start with, Catherine. And we probably don't have time for it just now, but to start with, using an LXP, it needs to be positioned differently. I've seen lots of customers launch an LMS around compliance, for example. Using a platform like compliance and launching that to a business is never going to inspire your employees to want to go back to it. So we need to treat LXPs and these new platforms or any LMS implementation differently. You need to be treating these platforms more like marketing tools. So, you need to be launching them around initiatives and campaigns, annual events that occur. You also need senior sponsorship. Again, I see a lot of companies purchasing learning management systems or LXPs without a C-level sponsor behind it, because you want to be actually capturing the knowledge from your senior leaders in the business and pushing that knowledge out to your employees. So actually having senior sponsorship from top down is very, very interesting as well. And the last part is it's actually just changing the content strategy that exists today. The reason that a lot of people don't get high levels of engagement with their learning management system, not just because of the user interface, because some LMSs have good user interface, it's usually the content strategy. If we had a poll question now saying how many of us today would go for a 60-minute SCORM course to learn something in our personal lives, I would bet quite highly that the answer would be very little. But that isn't the reality today, that we are pushing out that style of content. So at Fuse, we help our customers create a new content strategy, which is predominantly bite-sized, content which is less than 2 minutes in length, video-based in the main, because we know that as a medium works very well, although you do need to supplement it with other content. And then you need to be scheduling content to be deployed via push notifications to the audiences at the right time. So you're using more like marketing tools inside learning platforms now to push content out to users as if they're consumers. So there's lots of different angles to that. It's a very, very good question. And I'll be happy to share more after the call, but I am conscious of time, so I'm going to pass on to Ray.
Yeah, and just to quickly add on to that, Josh, I could say from an end user perspective, and I've always, tried to adopt that perspective when, bringing out any sort of new platform or new initiative. From a learning management systems, they've been around for quite some time. They were really built for L&D teams to keep things nice and organized, a training and documentation repository for people to go and pull things from when they needed it, versus say, something that has more social collaborative features like an LXP, like Fuse. That's really aligned to how people are learning in their day-to-day lives. We've got these computers in our pockets that we walk around with all the time. And, so I think getting closer to that, I saw a presentation recently and it said, one of the slides was, we're the Jetsons at home and we're the Flintstones at work. And, I think we need to, close that gap a little, but let's move on and let's pick up some more discussion. So, you can imagine all of this came from Josh to me, and I realized, wow, we have a lot of work to do. So we really want to make sure our learning solutions were agile, they were at the speed of business, and that our learners had easy access to performance support to answer their questions or sate their curiosity in the flow of work at the moment of need, anywhere, anytime, on any device. All of these things you've heard before, but actually having a tool to help you get there. So that they could really get right back into their work and continue delivering value to the business. Going back to that 1,000 hours of training, you know, that is not an impressive metric to me. It's about, did we get the information to you in an organized way in the time that you needed it so that you could get right back into your work? So we wanted to emulate a learning experience that our learners were familiar with using in their day-to-day lives, in our content structure and platform. So there's a lot here, right? We recreated micro-learning content, such as on-demand video like YouTube. The ability to like, comment on, and share content with others like you would on Facebook. Networking and collaborating as you do in LinkedIn. And the ability to contribute their own learning content. We also began re-engineering some of our more popular training and setting standards for any new content the L&D team created by a few different steps. So just to pause here for a second, we didn't want to blow up everything that we had, right? Because we knew we had some training that was really good, was business aligned. We didn't want to throw all of that out. We wanted to continue to provide that, but going forward, we had to draw a line in the sand and, you know, start thinking in this new way about learning and development. So as far as our content went, we required that all learning must align to and support the achievement of a business goal by increasing learner performance. We wanted to leverage pre-assessments to identify users' pre-existing knowledge to focus them on the content they didn't know versus what they already knew. Using blended learning to address different learning styles. Strategically using brain science by chunking content. Using visual schemas to help users make knowledge connections, so much more visual. And using repetition to reinforce comprehension, the way we learn in our day-to-day lives. Lastly, we want to leverage our platform's functionality and analytics to identify and promote content that learners were engaging with or voicing that they needed more of. So giving them a platform to call that out. And I think also important is to tag content based on a taxonomy that would enable us to track and ensure that we were training the skills we needed to not only achieve our business goals for today, but also map out our talent capabilities for the future. So tying in the whole talent management approach. I'm gonna turn it back over to Josh.
Yeah, so just following on from that, I think, you know, in the future, when we think about what learning systems might look like, I think that intelligent performance support will really eliminate the need for the majority of training. You know, if you did a search today for Steve Martin, the comedian, on Google, you know, it would bring you up, you know, images of Steve, featured videos of him, you know, the most popular ones, other information as well, and what also people are searching for when they search for Steve, which is quite interesting. If you look on the right-hand side here, if I search right now, how do I wire a plug into Google, it would, you know, bring me up a featured video, the most popular one on YouTube, showing me quickly in a minute or less how to wire a plug. It would then also provide recommended or related content or questions related to wiring a plug. And I think if we really think about, you know, where learning platforms need to go, this is the type of thing we need to be building out. Very useful content based on people's search terms, and then giving them alternative content to discover based upon that search as well. So what Ray was really doing at Omnicom when we worked together, he was creating this bite-sized content. So, you know, how do I do X? There would be a video inside Fuse for that, and a user will be able to search for it very quickly and then find related content to it as well. And then this could be done on the web, but it could also be done on a mobile application as well. So if you think about your learners today, do they have the opportunity to quickly search for a great piece of content, which is going to help them do their job better, or answer a customer query better, or respond to X better? That's the type of learning experiences we need to be building out. Short, sharp pieces of content with a search engine, which has intelligence to help users find the best content that they need to do their job better. So that's just a little bit about performance support and the future of where that's heading.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, Josh, really, you know, shifting from this less formalized, high fidelity content production, first of all, saved us as a learning and development team a lot of time. But we also want to introduce that ability for people to upload and contribute from their computer or their phone into the platform. It was just a huge game changer for us. It cut down that formalized learning, and it opened up the organization to that continuous real-time learning. I call it quick and dirty content, right? If it's internal facing, it's not going in front of a client, why put such time into high production quality? It should have good organization, and also, a good message, but ultimately it doesn't have to be that level of production. It's very similar to the content learners consume in their day-to-day lives. Another approach that further drove some change in our content was that we began involving our stakeholders who were coming to the learning and development team requesting learning solutions in the design process of the learning. So we started conducting design thinking sessions with them to really help the L&D team create the learning that they and their teams would ultimately be the end users of. So when there was that need for, very structured sort of learning, we didn't bring them into the design session. And this really started to eliminate the concept of the L&D bottleneck, where a stakeholder comes to the L&D team and asks for training, and we put them on our list, and maybe 2 or 3 months down the line we actually get something complete, at which time it may no longer be a problem or be relevant. So it started to eliminate that bottleneck, and it also ensured that the content was on point. It was very relevant because they were going to be the end users of it, and what we realized, we were gaining their buy-in to the solution before the content was even created. So just a big win all around of bringing in your stakeholders into the design process. Along with this shift in our approach to learning, we realized that as a result of these different changes, that we now have more time to truly partner with and understand the business units we were supporting, consulting and guiding them in their learning strategy, and ultimately getting out of their way by providing them a space to build communities of learning where they could organize themselves however they saw fit, whether that be a department structure or a particular project or initiative they were working on, or just something that they had in common around skills that they were trying to learn. Giving them that platform to come and learn from each other, exchange ideas, and create and contribute their own knowledge was just a real win for us. We realize, and this is kind of harkens back to Josh's ecosystem slide. Our new approach and the platform was not the only element of our learning ecosystem. We incorporated other tools and applications similar to those you see here to further enable that learning culture. So the concept of that silver bullet still doesn't exist. It really is an ecosystem of tools. So I'd have to point out here, all of these different shifts and thinking about learning and development differently. It stated that it helped me to really help to solve that thing that I knew was wrong for 5 to 7 years, which is a long time, and be able to address that head on with things I didn't even realize. So I was also learning at the same time. So that was really one of the biggest and hardest changes in this new way of thinking and learning. It was evolving the mindset of the L&D function as the guardians or controllers of the organizational knowledge. And that was hard for an A-type personality like myself. So, that aside, moving to providing and cultivating an experience, an environment where people were enabled, supported, we were facilitating and capturing learning. So by removing that bottleneck I spoke of earlier on, of all learning coming from the L&D team, we opened the gates to enable a learning culture. We always knew as an L&D team that we were never the experts in most of the skill areas that our learners used in their roles. we didn't do their jobs on a day-to-day basis. So how could we be? So as a result, and as an L&D function, our skills began shifting towards becoming more of curators and organizers and really sort of cheerleaders to get people, sharing their knowledge, because it was new to them as well, right? And this led to less creation of content and more of that curation and organizing. So before I jump into some results, and I'm sure you all been waiting to hear these. Any questions coming in, Josh?
Not just yet, I don't think. Oh, we got one here actually, Ray. I guess maybe we save it for later on. But it's, how did you move to a platform like Fuse, I guess, and what were the biggest challenges in doing that? Moving from a traditional LMS to a platform like Fuse, where it's focused on bite-sized content, that type of thing.
Sure. Yeah, let's come back to that question. We'll hold on to that one and come back to it near the Q&A session at the end.
Oh, we've got another as well. So Denise has just asked, is there an archive feature for old content? Do you want me to take that, Ray, or should you?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so in terms of old content, firstly, unpopular content, i.e. content which doesn't get viewed, liked, shared, commented, that type of thing, naturally just raises to the bottom of the search results, that type of thing. And the most popular content rises to the top. Of course, you can archive content. You can archive content, delete content, put it into private communities where just the L&D team can access it. But the real important thing here to note is the most popular content and new content rises to the top, where users can see that easily and get back to it even quicker as well. So in answer to this question, yes, it can be.
Let's talk about some of the metrics here around the initiative that we went through. I'd say after convincing my organizational leadership to allow me to replace our LMS with Fuse, I began implementing our new platform. But again, I didn't really want to totally discard all of the learning content we had built in the past. We still gave our learners access to the training they were familiar with in our former system. But because I know the importance of change management, another skill very much needed in learning and development today. And I also knew that big bang change doesn't always go over well. There were so many new features in this platform. I didn't want to overwhelm our users, so I didn't even promote all the new and amazing features and functions right away. But people are curious, and they were early adopters. And ultimately, I came to realize that our learners were not just hungry, but they were starving for change, and they really wanted a place where they could flourish from a learning perspective. So I think it speaks to the fact that we really aligned our approach to how people were learning outside of work and bringing that in-house. So we began to measure our success after our first quarter, and we continue to report out on the traditional training metrics, because that's what our stakeholders were used to hearing about. We didn't want to just go cold turkey on that. But we did have the intent of phasing those metrics out over time as they became less and less relevant or interesting in the conversation. We also introduced some new metrics that we as an organization had not seen before. So we created this, what I call a continuum of engagement, and you sort of see that across the top of this slide based on how learners were engaging with content. So were they liking? If they liked something, they got 1 point, right? If they commented on something, it takes a little more effort, so they got 5 points. If they shared something with somebody else, they got more points. If they uploaded content themselves, so they were actually going through, some people need to know this, I'm gonna share some content, we assign them 10 points. So by assigning these higher point values, depending on their level of engagement, this informed our leaderboard that was built into the platform, and it helped us to quantify engagement. In our first 3 quarters after launch, we surprisingly saw a 40% increase in engagement quarter over quarter. So that was a little mind-blowing. And then what really took me aback was that a third of the content that we created in the platform was generated by our learners as opposed to the L&D team. And that, for me, was the biggest win. It was the biggest validator of our thinking, that by letting go of that control that we, so heavily guarded as an L&D team, and providing a space for learners to learn from each other and emulate how they learn in their daily lives, by far our biggest success. Coming back to the business, we also worked closely with managers to identify changes in learners' behaviors post-learning to ensure that we were delivering business impact, such as we decreased our onboarding times by 1/3, and we demonstrated, we were seeing a demonstrated product comprehension in client pitches. So again, coming back to that business metric, making sure that we're having that impact. So all of this, by laying this groundwork to foster this culture of continuous learning, our organization became more knowledgeable. They were more collaborative, more connected, but they were also agile, and we were prepared for the inevitable ongoing change that we all are going through in business. And that helped us to, and enabled us to remain competitive. So that's our presentation, and we really do appreciate you listening to our story. We'd love to open it up for Q&A. And I know, Josh, we had the one question about the hardest thing to implement. Before this, where I was concerned in terms of owning the implementation of a learning platform, it had been probably about 8 years. It took a good 6 to 9 months to implement that technology 8 to 10 years ago. Now, I didn't mention the fact that our further challenge with implementing Fuse is that we have 4 months, because we were decommissioning our existing platform. So timeline was tight. We had to get really organized and rely on our Fuse as our partner to help us evolve our thinking very quickly, organize our content, get it ready for import, along with all of our users, and setting it up in a new and different way to enable that new approach to learning and development. So I would say it was difficult from a timeline perspective. It was enlightening from an experience of shifting about learning and development. Josh, any other questions out there?
I guess another question is as well, how did your team change in terms of the structure of your team, maybe the roles of your L&D team that you had when you adopted this new approach to learning?
Sure. Well, going back to what we talked about earlier, looking at the data, we knew if we had a spike in data, for example, when we first launched, we knew we were going to have a big spike in data because, it's a brand new system. People want to check it out, see what's going on. That leveled off. And then when we would have, some sort of marketing initiative, some sort of communication, some sort of call to action for our learners, we would inevitably be driving traffic to the platform, right? So just understanding like where you would see different changes in the data and what that could potentially be related to outside of the platform. Then from a skills perspective, it's going back to really freeing up the team's time to better understand the business, partner with them, sit and talk with them, sit alongside them to understand what they do and where the problems are or initiatives that they were looking to push. And then ultimately, I'm sure we've all had that experience of someone coming to our team saying, oh, I need an e-learning on this and maybe a couple quick reference cards and, a side of fries, right? Like a drive-through window. And it's very much not that. It's let's get together, let's understand the audience, what your objectives are, tie those to the business, what problem is we're trying to solve, and we'll go back as the learning and development team, and we'll put together a solution that we all agree on, and then even include you in that design process to make sure that it's really relevant and it's really going to accomplish the objectives that we have. So it's going more to that consultative mindset, which I think a lot of learning and development professionals would love to be having more conversations like that versus, hours and hours of content production time. So shifting away from that, and then again, driving community engagement, encouraging people to contribute, because we're pushing them outside their comfort zone a little bit, and it takes time. Again, it's not just implementing a platform, it's not just changing your content structure. This is culture shift. It's hard, but it's ultimately a good thing, because it's already proven that it's something that most people are engaged with outside of work. So I think bringing that to the work environment was really helpful. So just kind of keeping all of those things in mind. But it's not like we got rid of people on our team. We just evolved skills that they already had.
Makes sense. And we just have another question from Heather. Thanks, Heather. How do you get upper management to see the ROI on an LMS? Maybe I'll start, Ray, and then you jump in. I guess the first thing is about understanding, what are you trying to achieve with the implementation itself. Although you want to get some tick box exercises to ensure people are compliant, that's not the real reason we need to implement a new technology. It's usually to help drive business performance more than anything else. For us, it's building dashboards into the platform where, a senior leader can log into the platform and see how their team or their whole organization or region are accessing the platform. How often are they viewing, consuming, sharing content? What the most progressive companies are doing right now is actually bringing in business data into those same learning and HR dashboards. So right now we have customers where they can see a dashboard as a C-level leader where it's looking at the business performance, sales revenue, customer service scores, other types of data as well, and then correlating that data against the learning data. And what we're trying to really understand here is the learning we're pushing out to the business directly impacting the business metrics that we're trying to achieve. So getting upper management involved is by giving them simple tools to look at dashboards very quickly, and seeing both business data sitting alongside learning data for the first time. Traditionally right now that probably happens through pulling off, an Excel spreadsheet from LMS and seeing who's completed a course. That's not really going to hit the mark with C-level executives who want to really see how that's correlating against the business performance metrics that they've set out to be achieved. So that's all I've got to say on that. Ray, have you got anything to share about your experience of demonstrating ROI?
Yeah, I think the thing that helped me really to sell this shift in learning in-house to our leadership was really talking about how we were going to save people time. The inevitable excuse that we've probably all been hearing for such a long time is, I just don't have time for training, right? So my counter to that, because that's not the real complaint, my counter to that is, if we were to package our content in such a way that we could end up saving you some time in your day-to-day work, would you then make time for training or learning? And that question, they almost always say yes. So I think selling that concept in-house, that we don't want to take hours and hours away from people's day-to-day work and, be able to give them this micro learning approach that aligns with, something they're very familiar with in their day-to-day lives. We want to keep driving business revenues. Always bring it back to money, where you can, or gaining efficiencies. So that really helped to sell the fact that our approach to content structure was going to be a win for us. So I think that's one of the main things to beyond engaging employees that really helped to sell that concept in-house.
That's great.
Other questions?
I think that's pretty much it. Have you got anything else left to share, Ray? I know we've got a couple of minutes left.
No, I think we're good. I want to thank everybody for listening to the pizza story. And thank you again for your questions, your time. Feel free to reach out to either Josh or myself via LinkedIn. We'd be happy to connect and continue the conversation.
Thanks, Ray. So I guess over to hr.com to wrap up.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much, guys. Awesome presentation today and lots of great comments coming in there. And thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. Fuse Universal as sponsor, thank you so much. And again, thanks to Josh and Ray for such an excellent webcast. Special thank you to all HR.com members for joining us. If you'd like to view this webcast again, the archive recording and slides will be available for up to 7 days for our free members and without restrictions for those of you with a certification membership. The webcast credit will show in your HR.com account within 2 business days, and we will also send you an email with the credit information. So your feedback is very important to us. Please, a friendly reminder to take a moment to fill out the exit survey that opened in a new browser page on your computer. So this concludes our webcast. And again, thank you all so much. And I really do hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, everyone.